Hey, what's up, Canada and beyond? Welcome to a beautiful Monday afternoon in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And we've got a special guest today speaking out for the first time publicly since he really hit the top of the mainstream news in the past week. We are absolutely living in an upside down world. You guys know that have been following for a little while that we've been giving our platform to doctors to have the podium to share the information and the truth as they are seeing it and experiencing it in the real world, counter to the narrative that's out there. So on that note, we've been bringing doctors in here to help clear the air of the noise out there, regardless of personal opinion or our opinion. The truth needs to be told. Canadians deserve better. And on that note, speaking out publicly today for the first time, we have Dr. Christian joining us from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Pleasure, and it's an honor to have you to the show, sir, today. I just wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Tell us, for those of us out here that aren't familiar, tell us a little bit about who you are and how we end up meeting today.
Wayne, thank you for having me on this show. It's an honor for me to be on your show. My name is Francis Christian. I'm a surgeon. I have a fellowship from the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh, and I have a fellowship from the Royal College of Surgeons of Canada. Up until 23rd of this month, I was clinical professor of surgery in the University of Saskatchewan and with the Saskatchewan Health Saskatchewan SHA, so Saskatchewan Health Authority. And on the 23rd, I was fired from my clinical professor of surgery job. I was also fired from my two other appointments with the Saskatchewan Health Authority and with the College of Medicine. And that was, I was director of quality and patient safety in the Department of Surgery, so I was fired from that. I was also fired from my other job, which was the director of surgical humanities. The reason for my firing was ostensibly because I asked for informed consent. Informed consent, Wayne, is actually a very old, well-accepted, and extremely important sacrosanct principle of medical care and any kind of intervention. What it is that it asks us as physicians, as people, as public health officials, as teachers even, to explain fully to the patient or to the person getting that intervention, what are the risks of that intervention? What are the benefits? And are there any alternatives? And I asked for informed consent in the rollout of vaccines at warp speed in our province to our kids.
And this is this a direct response to the public request? I was at a press conference that you guys spoke to, yourself and another doctor in Saskatoon, just a few days prior to this. And honestly, I kind of feel bad because I didn't really film it at the time. I was listening and I thought, okay, well, there is nothing unusual about this. It was very well worded, very articulate, very to the point, nothing offensive. This was just, to me, it was just echoing the voices of Canadians. So I was there and I heard this, and then I saw the response or heard the response a couple of days later. Is this what triggered that?
Yes, because I was asking for a pause in the rollout of the vaccination to our kids. As far as I didn't make any statement about adults, about the vulnerable, about the elderly. I made it very clear that I was pro-vaccine. I made it very clear, for example, that I'm only too aware that the great scourges of mankind, including smallpox, have been eliminated by vaccination or made innocuous by vaccination. I also made clear that I'm pro-vaccine for my own family, including myself. I was addressing parents and their kids because in our province, and I believe this is happening in other places in Canada too, kids as young as 13, 14, 15 are able to get the vaccine without parental consent. And the fact is, everything has its benefits, everything has its risks, and there are alternatives. So there wasn't even a minimum of informed consent being given to our kids and to our parents. And I asked that parents and children must, at a minimum, know a number of things which really cannot be contested at all. It's just based on the evidence.
It's been mind-boggling to me to see this process happening where now you're not alone in this, as we're seeing, and there should be nothing punishable in any medical official in this country asking for better knowledge, better information for the patients. This is the biggest point out of all of this is now this is an extreme measure what we're seeing being inflicted upon yourself, and I want to keep going back to I've been following what you guys have been doing, and there's been nothing, sorry to say it, but noteworthy and newsworthy out of what you guys have been doing. You guys have been doing the same as all good doctors across the country, using the means and methods at your disposal to try and bring a better, more ethical service to your patients and to try and do no harm. Why is this becoming such a punishable offense? Because and we haven't even got to speaking about the meeting that you had. That was absolutely almost, I almost can't even put words together for how I felt listening to how you were treated. But this is foreign to us.
Yes, and unfortunately, it's foreign to the history of free speech, the free exchange of scientific ideas and scientific progress. Who would have thought, Wayne, that even a year and a half ago, we would be debating and seeing whether this is a fireable offense, my asking for informed consent. So informed consent is so basic in medicine to any intervention, including vaccination. And who would have thought that we would be sitting here a year later and essentially debating or even discussing whether it is a fireable offense to ask for informed consent. Now, we haven't come here, I think I'd like to say something perhaps later on at the stifling of scientific debate in this whole COVID pandemic crisis. And sorry, Wayne, you were going to say something.
Oh, it's just again reaffirming that all of us, pretty much anybody over the age of 25 or 30 understands the foundations of medicine as from the most layman's terms are do no harm and have informed consent. This is our right, our privilege, and our doctor's duty. So when doctors are attempting to do their duty, as you have been doing, and obviously I can't imagine the amount of frustration that you must have felt to bring you to the point where you felt compelled to do a press conference and ask for this in a public fashion. What brought you there?
Wayne, it was the fact that they were rolling this out literally at warp speed to our kids. There were many things that were controversial about the handling of this pandemic. I've been trying in local circles to influence the debate. I've been trying to get out scientific ideas for debate, and that is always very difficult in this climate. I mean, it's only in the last few months that we have not been able to debate the conclusions, the processes of science. This is actually dystopian. If you think about it, scientific progress occurs because of opposing views. Those opposing views are then debated, and a conclusion is arrived at, and science then moves forward. What is happening now is there is only one narrative that is being allowed to be broadcast by mainstream media. And I have to call out CBC, CTV, Post Media, Globe and Mail. I mean, if you actually look at all these publications, and if in our town here of Saskatoon, the Post Media publication is the Star Phoenix. So if you look at all these publications, they're acting literally as arms of government. They're not doing what journalism and the press should do. And that is to be a critical voice, to report the science accurately, and to make sure that both sides are being heard. And that's not happening.
It's so beyond the opposite of that happening. I witnessed with my own eyes here only a few weeks ago where vultures from 4 different media outlets were literally circling a church with their cameras out, hoping to take pictures of somebody that they could crucify. This is what our media has become.
So I have to say, Wayne, my firing is definitely a very disturbing thing, and I do hope and pray that our authorities here will see science, reason, humanity, ethical behavior, and so on, and reverse course. But I think the issues are much larger than me. And the media, as I said, Wayne, has ceased to play the critical role it is required to play. For example, I'll give you an example, if I may.
Absolutely.
The media has repeatedly put forward the claim, and I'm just quoting this from the latest in the Star Phoenix. We have the correspondent just essentially put this straight from Health Canada. The 4 vaccines approved by Health Canada, quote, have undergone clinical trials and a rigorous approval process both in Canada and other countries. Now, this is not only false and it just simply parrots the official narrative, it is actually dangerous. The 4 vaccines approved by Health Canada have not been authorized for use in the usual fashion. In Canada, they're under what we call interim authorization. In our neighbors to the south, they're under what is called emergency use authorization. In fact, Wayne, full authorization of a vaccine takes several years and multiple safety considerations. And it's very ironic, isn't it, that as I was being fired, the CDC in the United States was meeting to review a very serious side effect or adverse effect of the vaccine in otherwise completely healthy, mainly men, but also in women who are less than or equal to the age of 19. So in other words, kids who are otherwise completely healthy who are coming down with a condition called myocarditis. And that is only, they're only studying those who have been admitted to hospital or to urgent care. And that is not to say that other kids are not also having myocarditis. So interestingly, Wayne, just to tell you the bias of this media that has been captured by government narratives, I have to tell you, the Swedes recently came out with a definite recommendation not to vaccinate kids. The Germans have said the same. The UK is considering issuing guidelines not to give the vaccine to kids, not just because of myocarditis. There are other reasons. But here are 3 major nations saying, do not vaccinate kids. And then the WHO on the 21st also had the statement out that it is not advised, 21st of June, that the vaccine is not advised for kids. And here we are with CDC meeting to consider in emergency session about myocarditis. Actually, Afterwards, they came out with a recommendation that there should be a warning about myocarditis. And on the same day, I'm fired for asking for informed consent. This is the dystopian media that we are living under. I mean, it's because of people like you that the word is getting out. I mean, otherwise, the people are completely in the dark because they're reading, they're hearing, they're watching only one narrative. And that's exactly what happened, Wayne, in the Soviet Union, where media was co-opted to be arms of government. And that's exactly what's happened. People who have come from the Soviet countries actually tell me that it's much worse here than they remember.
It's amazing to me how many people that I've met over the last year that originally hailed from the Eastern Bloc countries who are going back because they say Russia is the freest nation on earth at this moment, and that's, to me, should be just mind-boggling for every single Canadian out there when we're seeing, as you said, all of these. And it's interesting that all of these agencies that are now doing an about-face were the same agencies that our government dispelled of all of the measures and safety protocols that we had in place, got rid of it all to adopt these new measures, and now they're being reversed elsewhere. And our government here seems intent on ignoring the memo, not even discussing it, and persecuting it beyond any form of reason. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say that's exactly true. I have to say too that eminent scientists, eminent epidemiologists, eminent physicians who have been all their lives doing immunology, vaccinology, they are leaders and giants in their fields. The media has been censoring them too. And I'll give you some examples, if I may, Wayne.
Sure.
Okay. So there's a guy called Martin Kulldorff. Okay, Martin Kulldorff. I mean, many of your viewers would not have heard about him because he's being censored. But I got to tell you, Martin Kulldorff, he's such a big and towering figure in Harvard that they kicked him out of some vaccine committees, but because of his views that oppose the official narrative. But vaccine committees, epidemiologists, they hang on his words. He's a master in his field. Then you have Oxford scientist Sunitra Gupta, Stanford. There's a guy called Jay Bhattacharya, and he is both a economist and a physician, and he studies epidemics, and he was censored too. And in our own Canada, Wayne, you have a very eminent virologist. His name is Byram Bridle. I believe he was on your show as well.
Yeah, we've done a couple of with Dr.
I got to tell you, Byram is a giant in his field. He's an immunologist, a vaccinologist. He has his own viral research lab, and what happened to him was terrible too. I mean, he was essentially asking for an open debate on the vaccine. And his urgency was the same as mine, that the kids were being, vaccinated without informed consent. And just for asking for an open debate and putting out some of the research that he had come across, he was censored in the media. He was even vilified in the media. Some prominent people even started to go after him with false accounts and so on. So this is more or less what happened in the Soviet Union. If you didn't follow the official narrative, you were immediately vilified. You would lose academic appointments. There would be tribunals set up to basically make academics shut up or disappear. So if Canadians don't wake up now, I fear that it may be too late. I'll give you another example, and this is about early treatment. Okay, so the narrative for vaccines is that this is a very bad disease, and of course we know it's a very bad disease. I mean, I worked through the pandemic. I operated on patients with N95 masks on. I looked after patients in emergency, in trauma, in the outpatient clinics. And I know that people have died of COVID-19. And nobody is claiming that this is a fake pandemic or this is a conspiracy or anything of that sort. We know that this is a real virus. But we also know certain other things. We know that the vast majority of those who die are over the age of 80. We know that in Canada, the mean age of those who die is well above 80. We know that in Canada and around the world, COVID-19 does not pose a threat to our kids. The risk of them dying of COVID-19 is 0.003%. 0.003%. This is even less than the risk of them dying of the annual flu. So, is there an emergency for the elderly, for the vulnerable? Sure. Should they be vaccinated? Of course. If you can prove that the vaccine is safe and effective, absolutely. And, one could make a strong case for vaccinating healthcare workers. But children, for rolling out the vaccine to kids without informed consent, I was asking the province to put a pause on it. I was asking, let's hold back. Safety is paramount. We don't know enough about this vaccine.
It's amazing to me where the politicization and the media sensationalization of all of this has completely gone off of the rails, where no rational, reasonable conversation is not even allowed. It's not even tolerated. And throughout the last 6-8 weeks, I've had the extreme fortune, the blessing to speak to the most brilliant minds in North America, and none of them are against trying to help people. That's in essence all they want to do, and having a discussion is what will help people. And it's startling to me how, regardless of the field or the nature of the expertise, the instant anybody asks for as much as a discussion or a hang on a sec here, let's talk about what we're doing, they're receiving the treatment that you are. And it's your case is perhaps a little bit more extreme than some of the other doctors at this point, but not really. And it's only a matter of time before anybody that is speaking up against this is going to be in the same situation. And so I'm at a loss as to how to move forward with this when we're going to be censored and silenced over it, particularly yourself. I'm a stubborn guy. They try to shut me up all the time. I just find someplace else to talk. It's different for you folks, that this has a massive impact on you guys, your families, and your community, patients included. That's a far-reaching set of circumstances that the media and the bureaucrats are actually endangering.
Wayne, we have no choice. We have to fight this tyranny. I'll give you another example of censorship, which has possibly and very likely caused and has been responsible for lots of deaths. Okay, and I'll tell you, and I'll give you. I'm not saying there's proof that people could have been saved, but it's very likely that people could have been saved if this information was not actively suppressed by the arms of government, which in Canada are CBC, CTV, and Postmedia, Globe and Mail, Toronto Star. I really think they should be ashamed of themselves. Do they have a conscience? I mean, I get it that the government does give them massive advertising for vaccines and possibly some direct help as well. But are there journalists with conscience there? Are there journalists who say, hey, this is not right? We have to do journalism in the historically competent way, with integrity, reporting both sides of the story. I don't think so, because I don't see any change at all. It's the almighty dollar that rules the roost, and that's really unfortunate. Now, there's a drug for early treatment. It's called ivermectin, and there are some other drugs too. And there are leading voices in critical care, in therapeutics, in the world that are saying, if you use this drug, if you use early treatment, and there are some other drugs too, you can save lives. They've shown it. They've shown that ivermectin saves not just 100 lives or 200 lives, but literally hundreds of thousands of lives. They've shown it. There are like 50 studies, and many of them are what is called randomized controlled trials. And multiple meta-analyses. That means we take all the trials together and we put really good analysis tools to see what is the net result of all the trials. And these meta-analyses have shown massive effect in preventing death. Anything from 60% to 75%. So it's massively effective. And I got to tell you, if I may, Wayne, of the people who actually did and are doing the research on ivermectin. Can I tell you a little bit about them?
Absolutely, please do.
Okay, so one of them is Pierre Corey. Now, if your listeners haven't heard about Pierre Corey, you got to blame the media, and you got to blame government. You got to blame. Unfortunately, you have to blame people like this Saskatchewan Health Authority and the College of Medicine, and of course mainstream media, which is unfortunately has now become an arm of government. So Pierre Corey is an ICU specialist, a critical care specialist. He's actually looked after dying COVID patients. He actually is also the author of a very popular textbook called Point of Care Ultrasound, which is used all over the world, including in Canada. So he's one of the guys who has done research on ivermectin. The other guy is a fellow called Umberto Meduri. Now, again, I don't blame your readers for not having heard this name before, because Umberto Meduri is part of this group that is advocating for early treatment. And he is the father of non-invasive ventilation. Non-invasive ventilation is where you don't put a tube down the windpipe, and instead you put things like masks and ventilate the patient like that. And that has played an essential role in the COVID-19 pandemic. So it is from his pioneering work that non-invasive ventilation became known around the world. And then you had another guy, and this guy is the second most published critical care physician or intensive care physician in the world. His name is Paul Marik, M-A-R-I-K. So these guys have formed what is called the Frontline Critical Care Alliance. They are being censored too. So Pierre Corey gave a Senate testimony on YouTube. It had about 8 million views, and then YouTube took him off. Then you had Pierre Corey talking to various groups, and he's been censored on Twitter. He's been censored on YouTube. But I've got to give credit to Twitter, because they're censoring the least, at least now. I mean, maybe somebody has a conscience there and has woken up about the importance of preserving free speech. And these guys have published widely. And they did a fantastic meta-analysis which showed ivermectin is not just useful, but decisively useful. And they were censored too. And I can go on and on. So this censoring has to stop. If there is good early treatment, why I don't know what the answer is. I do know that it might interfere with the vaccine narrative. That if there's good early treatment, then perhaps some groups, young people, for example, don't need the vaccine. I don't know. What is driving this censorship of science?
This is where, as a journalist, I live in a very different world than what you've been living in and are now, unfortunately, being exposed to. And as far as I'm concerned, probably the most heinous criminals of all are absolutely the media. the mainstream media. They have been traditionally, they exist. They're written right into our constitutions to protect their free speech, because they are traditionally the ones who held government to account throughout history. This has been the role that media has played. That's their essential service. So they have been very, very protected. But now we can see where infiltration and money changes all of that. And I say this often, that I believe that souls are cheap these days, and this is how this has kind of gotten to be this bad. But a couple of points that I really wanted to key in on there was about seniors, and I can't speak for any of the other provinces, but I do know for a fact that in Alberta, the median age of death actually rose a year. It's now 83 versus 82. So people are actually living longer in the period of COVID than they were prior to COVID, but yet we still have all of this insanity going on. And without having the, I call them mockingbird mercenaries, because really they are hired hitmen of the mainstream media. If they were giving you and experts and scientists like yourselves even just fair opportunity for discussion, we wouldn't be in this situation at all, because there is so many more of you that are saying, hang on a second here, are we doing the right thing? It's not about if we can do this, but should we do this? And that is being absolutely stifled. To me, the media is the worst enemies in this, and it all boils down to the dollars and cents. And just a little note on Twitter there, where you mentioned it. Yes, they lately they have been censoring a lot less, but the reason for that is because they were initially the worst censors on the internet, and they lost so much of their market share that they have been backpedaling very, very hard to stay relevant and to not actually collapse. And this is where people like us have the power, an unseen power, to affect that kind of change. So although it looks like they're censoring a little bit less now, they are. I've been actually trying to get myself kicked off of there lately as a test, and and it almost seems impossible now. It's bizarre.
Well, I like to think, Wayne, that you're right, and it's because of the dollars and cents that Twitter has changed. I like to think, I'm a romantic at heart, and I like to think that the voice of conscience speaks to even Jack Dorsey and people under him, and hopefully they are something is telling them that, look, guys, if you are censoring life-saving treatment, history is not going to look kindly on you. And so maybe you're right, and you're probably right actually about dollars and cents. But maybe that what we're asking for is an open debate. There's data, there's numbers. At the early stage of the pandemic, we didn't know much about this virus. Many of us supported things like lockdowns. We now know that lockdowns are devastating on society. There is data on that. There's data that lockdowns cause increased suicide rates, increased child abuse rates. There's data that lockdowns is really bad for children. And youth, and there's mental health problems, delayed cancer treatment. We have no idea yet whether lockdowns have killed more people than the virus itself. But we do know that it's actually killing people too. It's actually killing people. Lockdowns are. So we have that data. We have data about the virus. We have data about the vaccines. Why don't we debate it? Now, I got to tell you about something about free speech and how important it is, if I may, Wayne, if I have a little time for that.
Absolutely.
So, Wayne, free speech is so fundamental to our societies. If we don't fight for free speech, free expression, and the free debate of scientific ideas, we might as well say goodbye to all these, and then by the time we wake up, it'll be too late. There is, for example, signs that the tyranny is closing in around us. For example, anybody who studied Soviet history knows that certain words were weaponized, such as disinformation and misinformation, and that's happening now. So, I got to tell you, I was very supportive of all the official narratives in March of last year. I was a little skeptical about the way that lockdowns are being implemented, but I said, look, we don't know about this virus, so let's see and wait. And then in May of last year, I started asking questions. You know why? Because they were shutting down major scientific voices. And they were then using the words of essentially Soviet-type propaganda, saying that misinformation, disinformation, but experts, and experts, they never define who those experts are. And they never contrast those experts with the world experts like Kuldorf or Sunitra Gupta or Jay Bhattacharya, who have opposite views. So these are, the kind of newspeak from the Ministry of Truth, and readers will know which novel I'm referring to. The newspeak sort of manipulation of language is already happening. And I got to tell you, if Canadians don't stand up now, it may be too late. And let me give you a couple of examples. We all know that people lost their heads or were hanged or, burnt at the stake for free speech. I mean, people were burnt for wanting to read the Bible to the public, for example. So, there's a lot of history. People have actually died for this thing of free speech, the free exchange of ideas. But we also know in modern history, we know, for example, the Soviet dissident Andrei Sakharov. He was a scientist. And because he tried to speak up, he was persecuted. He had to flee the Soviet Union. And I don't know how many of your readers know of a physician by the name of Peter Bryce. Can I tell you a little bit about Peter Bryce?
Please do.
Okay. So Peter Bryce was a physician who actually, he was one of the founders of the Canadian public health system. In 1907, he wrote a very critical report about the terrible treatment of Indigenous kids in our residential schools. He pointed out that they were dying, literally dying, at many times the rate that should be expected. And the astronomical rates of people actually dying without any explanation, without any proper investigation in these residential schools was pointed out by Dr. Peter Bryce. The government ignored his reports. The government even tried to censor him. They prevented him from going to academic conferences, and finally he wrote a book. And I just off the top of my head, I can't remember the name of that book, but he wrote a book on the abuse that's going on in residential schools. And the fact is, we are not asking for people to accept everything we say. I don't think Martin Kuldorf or these eminent scientists or, Pierre Corey saying, you have to accept everything we say because we are the experts. No, they're saying, let's debate the science. Let's have free speech. Let's tell the public what is available. And the media is not allowing that. That is dangerous, really dangerous.
I think it's moved beyond even that. Most of the people that are standing up and trying to speak are saying, please don't believe me. Please look instead. And it's the nameless experts that actually drove me to the hunt down and to try and find an actual expert to speak to, not one of these quote unquote nameless experts, as you've mentioned. And this is where months down the road, I've spoken to so many actual real experts, and it's almost unanimous, you guys' experience. So I'm not a scientist, but when the same thing keeps happening time and time again, it kind of seems like a routine and something predictable. And then what I'm seeing is that it's not you guys. This isn't personal. This is the science that is under attack, and any person that speaks or tries to speak about the science comes under attack.
Yes, and the reason I decided to become public is because of our kids. As I was telling you, Wayne, adults can read the information. They can come to podcasts like your podcast. There are a few other sites that, Pierre Corey is now on his own FLCC website. It's called COVID-19criticalcare.com. And adults can do all those things. But children have no voice. We have to be their voice. And let me tell you a few things about kids and the vaccines, which are not controversial. These are, anybody can verify this data. And the first thing, which I pointed this out in my statement on informed consent, which led to my firing. One is that the mRNA vaccine technology is a new and experimental vaccine design in humans. It has never been tried in humans before. Does a 13-year-old kid giving consent for the vaccine know that? I haven't met a single kid or parent who knows even the basic things. I'm not going to give you, big data, but I'm going to give you a few points about the children and the vaccine, which I think all children and their parents should know. The second thing is something that I alluded to earlier, Wayne, that in Canada, it's under interim authorization. All the COVID vaccines, they have not received full authorization. In the USA, it's called emergency use authorization. And as I said, full vaccine approval takes several years, multiple safety considerations. And this has not happened with the mRNA vaccines. In fact, we're in the midst of what is called phase 3 trials, which do not end till, in some cases, till 2023 and beyond. And thirdly, if you think about it, this is kind of common sense, right? I mean, if you want emergency use authorization, there must be an emergency. And as I told you, Wayne, I really do believe that this was a terrible virus. And for the elderly population, for the vulnerable, for healthcare workers, I think there's, of course, an emergency. Several thousand people in Canada have died of COVID. But the mean age of those dying is over 80. There is a strong case. There is a strong case. And even all these experts say that. I mean, we're not anti-vaccine. I mean, you had this eminent immunologist and vaccinologist, Bonnie Mallard, who has received the Governor General Award for her work. She came on your show also and said, look, I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm pro-vaccine. That my whole life is showing that the right vaccines work. But in kids, this is not an emergency because COVID-19 does not pose a threat to our kids. There is no emergency in children. Now, fourthly, I said you should make it obvious and explicit in your informed consent discussions with the patient, with the parent, and the child, that children do not readily transmit the cold virus to adults. So teachers' unions, teachers have zero reason for saying you have to vaccinate the kids or, some big apocalyptic event is going to happen. It has not been shown in the data. The data shows, in fact, that in many countries, teachers had significantly lower rates of COVID-19 than the general population. And shouldn't the general population, especially the vulnerable, the old, and healthcare workers be immunized, immune, vaccinated anyway? It doesn't make sense. And fifthly, parents and kids have to know about the fact that the mRNA vaccines in the reporting systems, both by Health Canada, there's adverse reporting systems in the USA. It's called the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, of VAERS. It's all open data. I mean, this is, again, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's actual open data. And more than 6,000 people have already died of association with this vaccine. We don't know whether it's the vaccine has caused it. We say that this is a association and not necessarily a causation. However, this is a strong signal. It's a really strong signal. And when there is no risk to our kids or almost zero risk, why would we not take a pause? And interestingly, as I said, as I was being fired, the CDC was meeting in emergency session to consider the risks of the vaccine to kids. And then, sixthly, I have to say that Health Canada, it shouldn't follow. I know we are we work closely with the CDC. There were some reports that Health Canada even funds part of CDC. I don't know if that's true, but it's good. It's good to work with the CDC. It's got a great history, the CDC in the States. But you don't have to follow what the CDC says. You can make up your own mind based on the data. And what it's saying is the principle of avoiding harm is paramount, especially when Sweden has already said we're not giving it to kids. Germany has made that. German National Vaccine Agency has said, don't give it to kids. UK Vaccine Agency, we don't know, but they're poised to make the same recommendation. The WHO on the 21st said, don't give it to kids. What is Health Canada waiting for? The precautionary principle is paramount. And then this is something, I guess, which, you have to know a little bit of science, but you still have to know the scientific method. There's this thing called absolute risk reduction and relative risk reduction. And absolute risk reduction is much less than what the vaccine companies are saying it is. And finally, do parents and children know that the drug ivermectin is the alternative, both for kids and for adults? And there are other early treatment alternatives. Now, one of the big ironies of this whole dystopian information world we're living in is, authorities are saying against scientific training. I mean, we all have. I mean, I'm not. I don't say that I am an expert like Byron Brittle or Bonnie Millard. What I am saying is I can evaluate the evidence. I can evaluate statistics. I've been trained in microbiology. I've been trained in. Been trained in virology. I can actually look at evidence in an intelligent way. And the common, cheap, and very effective, very safe drug, ivermectin, is being blocked. Why? And again, I don't want to indulge in conspiracy theories, but you have to ask the question, why is it being blocked? And I made the point that at a minimum, that is what an informed consent discussion with parents and the children should be before they make a decision.
This is one of those things that makes having these discussions so fascinating with individuals as educated as yourself. You deal with data and facts and science in your trade craft, and in my trade craft, it's about looking at the theories of conspiracy. It's not it's an honorable thing to be doing, and this is when questions are brought forth, and the discussion isn't even allowed. Never mind the evidence. If the discussion is allowed, this should really raise red flags with every citizen that's being affected by this. But one of the things that you brought up there that I wanted to give people, to bring it up here again about perspective. If we had 6,000 people die of natural causes in our country, we accept that and we look for a way to solve that. If we had 600,000 people die in our country, we would ask who was at war with us. Now, keeping that in perspective, with VAERS having more than 6,000 deaths reported, understand that that's probably less than 1% of actual events. So this tells me if we had 100% reporting, if that was mandatory, if reporting of events was mandatory, and we had 100% of the events recorded, that number could very easily be 600,000 people. Would people believe that we were under attack then? To me, that's how I see it. That might be a conspiracy theory, but
there is actually controversy as to how to interpret that 1%, and I don't think your listeners will benefit from sort of a statistical discussion of that. But I got to tell you, we're just looking at the data. We're just looking at the ones that already happened, and that's 6,000. And if we underestimate it by not by 100, which some people are saying based on a paper that came out some time ago, let's say it's 10. It's still a lot of people. One person is too much, and 6,000 is quite a lot. And for a disease that poses next to no risk for kids, even a very few is catastrophic. I mean, let's not ignore the data. Let's pause. Let's not give it to our kids until we have much more data in the hundreds of thousands. Remember also that there is such a thing as a Nuremberg Code. The Nuremberg Code was written in the aftermath of the horrific experiments that were conducted by Nazi Germany on the concentration camp people without their consent. And these horrific crimes against humanity led to what is called the Nuremberg Code. It's all about informed consent. Please, Health Canada, the media, please do allow the free exchange of ideas. Please do allow the principle of safety first. Please do allow first do no harm, which has been one of the founding principles of medicine for centuries. Do no harm.
Well, it would be a simple thing if all of us had a really strong refresher on looking at those Nuremberg codes and the Geneva Convention as well, and comparing that to what we're seeing and feeling and experiencing. And that if that doesn't raise some significant concern, I don't think that there's any intellectual hope for anybody at that point, unfortunately, because really I can't see a single one of those codes that haven't been not just destroyed but absolutely shattered in Canada. And any as you guys have been proving yourselves correct just by speaking up, you become criminals for this. This doesn't seem to be trending in a positive fashion, and it's going to be up to the people. I think ultimately is the only way that we're going to be able to address this, because the media won't, the politicians won't. The politicians will only answer to votes. That's us. And until we have enough pressure on them to do what's right, not what's easy, they're only going to be considering doing what it's going to take to get reelected again. So we're in this catch-22 cycle, and people are so beat down that they are literally playing Russian roulette with their children. And this is just, the insanity has to stop.
Wayne, I think it's coming up to an hour, and I just want to close with a couple of
please, yes, let us know. For sure.
The first is the capture of the media by government is so complete that the media has succeeded even in blinding people. Not completely, because it's impossible, because we get a lot of American channels in our TV screens. But the attempt is there to not make the people aware of what is going on in the United States. Look at Florida, which has never had or hardly ever had a lockdown and this is from last May or June. And they're completely open now. They have been for several months. People are not dying in the streets. ICUs are not overwhelmed. They're, because they have a higher proportion of elderly people. Yes, a lot of people have died of COVID in Florida, but not proportionally, not more compared to the number of elderly people they have. Look at Texas. Canadians are watching ball games, which with 70,000 people, no masks, no physical distancing, children with their parents, parents with their, grandparents and parents. So everybody is living life normally in many American states, Texas, in Florida, in several other states. 20 American states have already passed legislation forbidding vaccine passports and vaccine certificates. So is the media reporting that? I got to tell you, the media is complicit in these various violations of our way of life, and so this is my hope that Canadians will look at what is going on in the U.S. Canadians will also look at the study, for example, that came out of England. They looked at something like 10 big sports events, okay? Soccer events, rugby events, massive crowds, no physical distancing, that did not, I repeat, did not lead to more cases. There is no reason for keeping people indoors because we know that the virus spreads indoors. If you bring them out, it is better for them. They'll get vitamin D, they'll get fresh air. I mean, come on, guys. Allow our Canadian citizens to see what is happening. So that's the first point I'd like to make. And the second one, and I'd like to leave you with this, Wayne, is again, if you study Soviet history or Nazi history, you'll see that that the freedoms were not taken away in one fell sweep. It was a little at a time, a little at a time, a little at a time. First, there was the conditioning by fear. That's happened already in our population, unfortunately. For a virus which is deadly for the elderly, for the vulnerable, but for young people and for children, it basically hardly touches them. I'm not saying that it doesn't affect them, but it's less lethal to children than the annual flu, and that's there in the statistics. So here we have the conditioning by fear. The Soviets did that. Here we have the fact that the freedoms are being taken away one by one, little by little, and just as in the Soviet Union or in Nazi Germany, by the time the population wakes up, and the population will wake up because the quest for liberty, for freedom, is within every person, irrespective of race, creed, and religion. So, but by the time they wake up, it may be too late. And so my hope is that my Canadian citizens, my fellow citizens of the world, will wake up, and that's why Wayne, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms is representing me legally, because I know they know that it's not just my job. I mean, I do hope I get it back. I mean, don't get me wrong, but the issues are much bigger. And the JCCF, and I would urge people to go to JCCF's website, jccf.ca. And it is an institution that Canadians must be really proud of, because the JCCF defends massive, hugely consequential issues such as freedom of speech, freedom of movement, constitutional rights, charter rights. And so these are the things that are under threat. And I do hope people wake up.
Well, I thank you so much for your time today. I know that you've been under a lot of stress and a lot of pressure, and you're going to have an awful lot of talking coming up for you over the next week or two. So I'm very grateful for you taking the time with us here today. And I'd like to leave the audience with something a little bit different. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about a book that you wrote. And share with us a little bit about that. Let's leave with that.
I hesitate because the issues are much bigger than this book. But I am a poet, and this is a book that was published by Harp Press, the publishers in Nova Scotia, and the book is called "To a Nurse Friend Weeping." And in fact, the book was released to the world only a few weeks ago. Thanks very much, Wayne.
My pleasure. This is something that I'm sure is people will find very poignant and will resonate with them. So again, thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Christian. I wish you so much luck in this fight. We're all in this together, whether we like it or not, because we'll all end up in the same place together if we don't stop the tyranny.
Thank you, Wayne. God bless you.
You as well. Bye for now. All right, guys. Thank you for hanging out with us this afternoon. It was kind of was able to get this put together yesterday to have Dr. Christian on and speak to us a little bit about what's been going on. There's links to all of the relevant articles in the show notes as well. This cannot be tolerated by anybody, folks. We cannot allow this is where it's up to us. It's up to us, the citizens, to take responsibility. Do we want to let the government continue to do this to the people that do have our best interest in heart, who are trying to do no harm, who are trying to stand up for reason, common sense, and discussion? This is where it comes up to us to accept the responsibility of what kind of Canada do we want to live in. Because if we allow this to continue to happen, and the only thing left are the paper, generic, don't know what they're talking about, following the government narrative doctors, I'm sorry, but I don't really want to trust my life to those guys. So we've got to stand up for doctors like Dr. Christensen and the rest of them that, whether we agree with what they're saying or not, we have to give them the right to speak, because this is the only way that we get to the answers and the truth in the heart of things. So I love you guys all. Stay Canadian. Keep fighting. Keep doing whatever you can with whatever you've got, wherever you are at, and protect the kids. Because if we don't have the kids, there is no future. So I love you all. Stay Canadian, and let's make Canada Canada again.